Filmcore. Welcome to a special Halloweencore Filmcore podcast. I'm Alex Kirschenbaum, joined in New York by Armani Barron. Hello, Armani.
Hello, hello.
We're here to talk about Wes Craven's new Nightmare, the possibly chilling, possibly disappointing seventh entry in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Yeah, a lot of thoughts about this. How do we start? Let's just start with the overall thoughts, I suppose.
Just when you thought this film couldn't get meta enough, you know, the end really adds another layer to this Russian doll of a film within a film within a film. Which I guess when you're in the seventh and then this kind of installment, like where else can you go from here?
Yeah, the ending was pretty meta. I guess just to back up. So the idea of this movie is it takes place in a world where the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is a movie franchise, and it uses the cast and crew from the first movie basically playing themselves or versions of themselves, and they start getting haunted in their dreams, some of them by visions of a Freddy Krueger-esque figure. And we find out later on that Wes Craven, the director, who's the director of this movie, playing a version of himself, is haunted by very specific nightmares that he then writes into a script of a movie he's trying to make with Heather Langenkamp, the star of the first and the third Nightmare on Elm Street movies, who plays a version of herself in this movie. And then she sees the fallout of his nightmares. He's basically writing horrific scenarios where her friends and family die around her. And then we find out that Freddy Krueger in this movie is a demon that's dressing up as Freddy Krueger to terrify them. Sort of like a hell beast. And then Heather and her son, played by Miko Hughes, who's the kid from Pet Sematary, they have to go through hell to battle Freddy Krueger. The ending, I agree. I thought the ending was a mess. But yeah, basically what you're referring to, Armani, is that in the ending, before she goes to hell, she finds herself stuck in the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, where the actor playing her dad somehow metamorphoses into her character's dad, her character from the movie Nightmare on Elm Street. Heather Langenkamp's character is Nancy Thompson in the first movie, and John Saxon plays her dad, Lieutenant Thompson. It sounds kind of headier than it is. It's like all this stuff is like the best part of the movie. I think the idea of the meta movie within a movie within a movie stuff, that's all cool. The rest of it is kind of a slog and not that fun, I thought.
Yeah, definitely the whole concept that sort of like Wes Craven is writing the movie while they're actually living it kind of reminds me or harkens back to a Neverending Story kind of situation where they're sort of aware that their reality is being sort of dictated by this sort of outside omnipresent force. It's kind of, but in a way it's kind of weird because in a way he could end all of this. I don't know. I feel like they never really gave a reason for the reason. Sorry. They never really gave a reason for Wes's motivations and continuing to write this book if he was or script if he was realizing that like what he was writing was actually happening.
Yeah, I don't understand that, really. I think they wisely kind of marginalize his character and the idea of him writing the script as it comes to him in his dreams, and then like all the scenarios he writes becoming real. It's smart that they don't dwell on that too much, because if you start to think about it too much, it falls apart. Because I agree, it's if he knows he's writing stuff where his makeup artists are getting killed, and the husband of Heather Langenkamp, who's also makeup artist, gets killed, and then Heather Langenkamp's star her life is threatened. Why and her son's life is threatened. Like, why would he continue writing that? And their babysitter dies, and some nurses at that hospital die, where they're treating her son. It's weird. If you know you're writing something that's killing people, wouldn't you stop? Like, why?
Well, yeah, especially once you realize that the killing is actually happening in real time.
Which he does, right? But when he meets with her and he shows her the script and he tells her,
it's sort of like the Jumanji of horror movies where you just got to keep playing it out, I guess. I don't really know.
That's good. Why wouldn't they just do that, though? Why wouldn't they sort of mandate it that he has to finish the script?
Well, if anything, Heather was the most well-equipped person to sort of survive the scenario. So it kind of felt kind of weird that she was one so like unwilling to accept the reality of the situation, or as mentioned in the movie itself, that this could be a possible like obsessed fan. Why it wasn't taken more seriously by like the police or by her when all these things are happening, especially her husband's murder, which seemed to be an obvious copycat crime. Well, before we totally rack, do you want to go into like what we thought worked?
Sure. Well, so I think, like I said, the overall setup is cool. This was sort of a proto Scream. It was obviously Wes Craven sort of feeling out his oats, being bored with straight horror and wanting to do something different. And from that perspective, that's the only part of it really that I think really works for me is the whole conceit of the movie within a movie thing. It definitely felt like he was sort of still working out the kinks of it, as we discussed with just the fundamental question of why he keeps writing if he knows it's hurting people. It doesn't really make any sense in the world of the movie. And if they just had sort of like, fleshed that out a little bit along with some other things, there's a couple of narrative things that were missing, but overall it's a cool idea and it goes in cool places. Except the ending is sort of just, I don't know, they're in hell and they're fighting this demon, and that's not so interesting. And I also thought the scares were kind of,
We're definitely a little campy.
yeah. But generally, the story was cool, and I thought the performances were pretty good. I didn't love Miko Hughes in it, and I actually thought he was really creepy in Pet Sematary when he was, I don't know, maybe 2. He was born in '86. This movie came out in '94, in late '94, so he was probably 8 when it came out, but probably 7 when they shot it, right? So yeah, but for whatever reason, though, I didn't find him scary. He's generally he was a pretty good child actor.
I mean, overall, I feel like Miko did the best that he had with the script, given his like age and the material. There were also like a lot of kid stunts, which I was sort of surprised by. Just like for example, when he climbed that rocket in the playground.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That was a pretty hardcore kid stunt. I was pretty impressed, honestly. A few things that I thought like that they did pretty well was the set design overall, like sort of touching more into that sort of like Beetlejuice surrealism, especially when she dives into the coffin to pull Miko out when Freddy like appears. And also just like even though the hell scene at the end was extremely campy, I really felt like overall the production design really stood out, especially given the time period that it was in. Like the whole quicksand stair scene was actually really well executed, at least from a practical standpoint. I mean, if this had been a Marvel movie, that would have been like all CGI.
Have you watched the old Nightmare on Elm Street movies much recently?
So no, just confessional here. I've actually never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street.
I see. Oh man. Well, this one's a fine introduction, but they get so much crazier. The '80s ones, I think, are really great.
Do you feel like it's? I feel like I sort of was at an advantage because I didn't see the other ones. Like I didn't really feel the same like nightmare fatigue that I feel like a lot of fans might have felt, especially because this was one of the poorer performing movies in the franchise.
The other movies they had much crazier production design after the first one. The first one was very low budget, you can kind of tell, but after the first one, they get so crazy and creative with a lot of cool makeup effects and just wacky, surreal dreamscape places. Pizza with like a sausage pizza, and then the sausages are Freddy Krueger heads, and then they attack him. Stuff like that. Yeah. It's amazing. They do all kinds of really cool stuff, and this one doesn't really. It's kind of lackluster relative to the other ones, but on its own merits, it's creative-ish. So, compared to a normal movie, it still looks much cooler. Even a normal horror movie.
The actress herself suffered from a lot of sort of hate mail and death threats from another project she was working on. So I feel like a lot of this really hit home for her. And I was surprised that she would take on a role that not only combined her assumed trauma from being in all these nightmare movies with like her real life stalker trauma.
She suggested that to Wes Craven because she was after her sitcom Just the 10 of Us was canceled following a 3-season network run. A creepy stalker was making threats against other people on the show, and the FBI informed her that she had to be cautious about her comings and goings, to paraphrase what she said in an Entertainment Weekly article about it. And so from that, she thought maybe this would be a cool thing to introduce into Wes Craven's new Nightmare. It has like sort of a realistic creepiness element. It is weird that she would opt to do that, but especially playing herself or a facsimile of herself. Like she's playing in real life. She's married to a makeup artist named David Leroy Anderson, and their company together, she runs it too. She's a co-owner. Is called AFX Studio. But yeah, she's married to sort of an approximation of that real life husband. Chase Porter is the name of the character, and then David Newsom's the name of the actor in the movie. But
I mean, pointing that out though, aside from just like trying to really up the stakes for her emotionally and basically every aspect of this role, I felt ultimately her delivery was pretty lackluster. I didn't like when her husband dies, she didn't seem to be as affected. I mean, I know this is overall like I'm not expecting Oscar-worthy performances here, but I feel like Miko honestly outacted her. It's a little weird that this movie was carried by a 9-year-old. I mean, I see her career is not really translated into like the now, which it might be due to the fact that like I feel like we expect a lot more from our horror actors.
yeah, so she said herself too that she's kind of, since she hit about 40, she's the roles sort of dried up, and so she transitioned into being this sort of helping her husband run his business with the AFX studio, the FX company. It's too bad. Although, yeah, I kind of agree. She's sort of flat in this. She's better in the first one. In the third one, she's playing. So basically, in the first one, she's playing this teenager, Nancy Thompson, and all of her friends get murdered by Freddy Krueger. And this is the first time that Freddy Krueger has been murdering kids on Elm Street, I guess, since he died. He was a child murderer. It's inferred that he did more than murder them. Just an awful person. And the parents burned him alive. And so when the parents who burned him alive, when their kids hit adolescence, Freddy Krueger started traumatizing them in their dreams. That's the setup of the first one and all the subsequent ones, basically. But anyway, in the first one, she's pretty good as a teenager that's going through this trauma. And then in the third one, she plays that character after having become a psychologist. And it's only 3 years later in real time, but in the movie, it's supposed to be, I don't know, I guess maybe 10 years later. And she's supposed to be this sort of, 30-ish psychologist, and she's got some gray in her hair, and it just does not work.
She's like 19, trying to be a 30-year-old psychiatrist.
Yeah, I mean, in real life, she might have been. Okay, so she was like 23, and it's just like, I don't know, I didn't see it, but she was good in the first one though, for sure. I enjoy her being a consistent person in these movies. I like that they have like the main final girl in the series. So it's nice when there's Freddy Krueger, obviously, your main adversary, but then there's also the good guy that's sort of recurring. So even though she wasn't great in it, I liked seeing her in it, I guess.
I guess to that point also, it's sort of alluded to throughout this movie that Freddy's return or entrance into the real world from the dimension that he's in depends upon him killing her, and I don't really understand what that connection was. Also, if that was his one motive, he had plenty of times to kill her and didn't do so. So I don't really understand like what the actual stakes were for his survival as a sort of pseudo demon on Earth.
Yeah, the setup of that was weird too. Why her? Why now? And if he's a demon, why is he dressing up as Freddy Krueger? Just because that's like the thing that scared her most in movies?
It's sort of like taking that it angle, I suppose. I don't know. I just feel like overall they tried to like justify more of his sort of relentless in trying to kill her. But what's kind of great about a lot of horror movies is like you don't really need that. It's just like he's just evil for the sake of being evil, and it becomes more of an ego killing thing versus like an actual reason to kill thing.
Yeah, it's true. And because we don't see him much and he barely talks, there isn't any sort of explanation for it. So yeah, you're sort of left wondering why. Although honestly, I didn't think about it that much. Because I was still trying to figure out what was happening, and it wasn't until the Wes Craven scene where he explains that Freddy is 100 years old, or several hundred years old, and he's just this evil demon presence masquerading as Freddy.
That's literally the It ending.
Yeah, it is the It ending. That's right.
Like, almost verbatim.
Yeah.
What I will say the real villain of this movie was LA earthquake.
Yeah, so that actually, they were able to, there was a big earthquake in January, the Northridge earthquake of 1994, and then they were able to incorporate that into the movie because it came out in October, so they made that a part of the story to give it some extra sort of grounding in reality.
Is that a pun? No, I mean, I know we're like movies tend to use a lot of ex machina, especially when it comes to like sort of weather. Like, oh, the power's out, a storm's coming just in the middle of this climax. So it was nice that the earthquake was a reoccurring sort of antagonist in a lot of ways.
Right. And then she imagines an earthquake at one point when she's fighting Freddy in her kitchen, sort of in the middle of the movie. Yeah, but I like that too. That was cool. It wasn't. I should clarify. Like, I didn't hate it or anything. I was disappointed, and I think in the rankings of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, the first 7 anyway, it's probably close to the bottom of my list. My top 3 would be Part 3, Part 2, and then Part 5. I think that's my top 3. But
having seen none of them except for this one, I would have to say honestly, I don't know if I need any more.
Oh no. Yeah, see, I feel bad because this is supposed to be good. This got good reviews. Everyone was saying, oh, it's meta. I think people were so wrapped up in the fact that it was a movie about Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
It was too busy trying to incept itself that it really just, the plot got too convoluted. If it had just been a sort of straight shooting, this is a Freddy movie, or honestly, if there had been a twist at the end that it actually had been a crazy fan doing these copycat sort of murders, I think that would have been a great twist at the end.
I would have been sort of bummed out if it just turned out it was like, the editor all along or something. But I guess I wouldn't have hated it if they handled it in a smart way.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was that limo driver.
The limo driver was very creepy. I like that too. I feel like there are a lot of things about this movie that sort of worked and like in the setup of it, and then they sort of dropped the ball. But it was, yeah, like when you mentioned the limo driver and the earthquakes, and I like the meta stuff too. I don't know, it's a shame because it's not like it started out being bad; it just sort of devolved.
Yeah, exactly. As things started to go on, it just really started to unravel. I think overall, this film would really benefited more from a shorter runtime, and just like a less convoluted plot. Like just if this had just been a straight Freddy movie with like the slight twist closer to the end that Wes had been writing the script, I think this would have been a better payoff than like getting that information like sort of near the middle end and then wondering why he's still making this go forward if it's clear these things are actually coming to fruition.
Yeah, it is pretty weird. And then in terms of the length, so it's an hour, 52 minutes. The best entry of the franchise, in my opinion, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, is only an hour, 36 minutes. And has a killer Dawkins song at the end. But anyway, it's like, yeah, you don't need 100 minutes to tell a horror story, especially something like this where like the more you think about all the mechanics of him writing these murders and for no real reason, just feeling okay about it. Like I think the less time you have to think about the plot, the better. So yeah, you should cut it off. Yeah, maybe 100 minutes tops. But yeah, getting to 112 minutes is too much.
I feel like you could watch the first 40 minutes and watch the last 40 minutes and really just get all of it, to be honest.
I don't love where it goes in the last 40 minutes, but yeah, you don't, in terms of the narrative, it kind of does slow down in the middle there. So the Freddy makeup, so in the first couple of movies, the Freddy makeup is like this, it's this creepy burn, and it's much more grisly, and I wouldn't say realistic, but it's a heightened realism. And in this one, it's not, it's like a mask. It's like He's got slits for eyes. He looks like a member of like Slipknot or something. I don't know. I hated the makeup.
I think overall, I think also too, like, his powers just felt, just way campier than I remember them ever really being. I mean, but of course, I haven't seen the other ones. But, like, near the end scene where there's, like, the massive tongue wraparound.
Oh, no, that's...
Where the kid is, like, stabbing it. I'm like, what is going on?
He does stuff like that in the other movies. Like I said, he turns into sausage pizza. He does the phone thing where I don't really remember if it's Heather Langenkamp's character Nancy Thompson on the phone, but somebody on the phone with somebody else, with their friend, and then Freddy his mouth turns into the receiver, and then he starts like licking the mouth of the girl talking on the phone. So like he does stuff like that, or he turns into a giant slug because it's the dream world.
Okay, I see. Like it's supposed to be pure like surrealism, like nightmare, essentially. So there are no rules.
Yeah, they're not like Inception dreams. They're like actual dreams where anything happens and there's just craziness and creatures, which is like the big reason that you can make like 10 of them and they're all pretty interesting. I guess the actual final count is 9. There are 9 of them, if you count the remake as part of the saga. But I don't know that you have to do that. But this is unlike someone like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. Like, this is a character that you can do a lot with because it's just all the crazy dreams you can think of. And so every dream looks like a wacky 80s video during the movie's peak. But yeah, you can do anything with the dreams, so it's cool. It's a sequelizable setup because it's all these nightmares. But also Freddy, had all these great one-liners and stuff. This Freddy doesn't really talk that much. He's more creepy. But anyway, it's a character that lends itself to weird permutations, which is why, again, this movie is a big disappointment because they really could have nailed a story like this and had it feel true to the other movies. That was a convoluted way to say that. But the point is, disappointing stuff. I hope you watched at least Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
As far as like me continuing to work my way through this franchise, it's going to be slow going. I wouldn't walking into this sort of like cold with just this being my first impression. I'm definitely not sold, but I'm willing to break in maybe out of order. I don't know how. I've always felt like the best franchises are the ones that sort of work regardless of where you pop in. Like a lot of these Marvel movies, for example, it's nice to have that backstory, but they're pretty much built to be standalone pieces as well.
In terms of, like standalone movies, I think, I don't know. It's nice that you should probably see the first one first. I think the first one is totally solid for what it is. But you can tell that they had a lot more money to play with subsequent entries. I guess the second one was kind of rushed, but the second one did do some wild stuff.
What I will say is I was very sad. Isn't Johnny Depp in the first one?
Yes.
I was kind of expecting them to sort of like have him do a cameo. It feels like a really missed opportunity, but I guess by this point he's too famous. Or maybe filming What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Yeah,
that was around that time, 93, 94. Gilbert Grape, I think, was 93. Deadman was 95. Don Juan DeMarco might have been 94, 95 also. Oh, Ed Wood.
I want to believe that there was a scheduling conflict and that he genuinely wanted to be involved in the project, but who knows? Maybe he read the script and was like, not for me.
If he's willing to do a 21 Jump Street cameo and he's willing to do a cameo in Kevin Smith's Tusk.
Yeah, but this is before he ruined himself with Lone Ranger, so I don't know.
Yeah, that was kind of the moment he jumped the shark, huh? I really wanted to like that movie on a separate Johnny Depp thread. I mean, he was fine in it, but it was 2.5 hours long. It was very serious, and it was all approaching the whole thing the wrong way.
He really peaked at Rango. I don't care what anyone says. Right then was like the end for me.
I mean, Rango was really good. I think his peak is Ed Wood. I think that's his best movie. It's one of the best movies ever. Johnny Depp would have been good. Also, in terms of the non-actor cameos, Wes Craven was kind of flat, I thought. But I thought Bob Shea was pretty good. Bob Shea is the head of New Line, who talks to Heather Langenkamp in his office.
Answer the phone, Bob.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably the one of the most quotable lines from the movie.
He was pretty good.
I mean, honestly, that scene was like my favorite part
I think,
of the entire thing.
yeah, I think mine too.
Also, I just as a small side note, I just wish they stopped trying to act like Heather had this career that was really popping off. Because at any opportunity they had to compliment her, the film would. And it kind of felt like I was watching some sort of like weird hype reel for her.
Yeah, I guess I will say though that when she's in the back of the limo and the limo driver says something creepy like "you're a star" or something, she says, "Yeah, kind of,"
And we're like, yeah, kind of.
something like that, right? And so I think she, as her character, there was some tempering of that where she's aware that she's not like, she's not a Johnny Depp level star. This is, like I said, sort of a proto Scream, or it's the first Wes Craven movie that's so self-referential, navel-gazing, whatever you want to call it, and looks inward in a way that this movie doesn't quite get the balance right, but he would figure that out later. But as a first stab, I think it's good. But anyway, I guess the point is, belatedly, do you think it was necessary for him to do this to sort of as a table setter for what he would do in Scream? And why do you think Scream works so much better?
I mean, I think it's always sort of hard seeing sort of that prototype for a working script, and it's nice that he, I guess, had the fun to sort of play with that concept. Because I actually just recently watched Scream, and I mean, it's been so long since I had seen it. It actually is executed really well in a way that is not only self-aware, but also feels refreshing at the same time, because it not only acknowledges the sort of tropes that it embraces, but also manages to sort of successfully subvert them. And then, of course, this leads, I think, I wish they kind of stopped with Scream 1, but of course, it became its own trope by continuing to make Screams.
Well, yeah, but I like Scream 2, because Scream 2, did you see Scream 2?
I feel like it sort of lost those sort of points it earned with being so aware and then continuing to sort of go down the same rabbit hole as previous horror films had done and continuing to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. You can't be, Scream 2 is never going to be Scream 1, but it was very smart about being a sequel, and like that was the big thing that they were talking about the whole time, basically, were just how rules change in sequels, and keeping track of that, so that was really a fun wrinkle. It wasn't as good as Scream 1, but it was still pretty fun.
I think as a script exercise, I think this could have just stayed a script and sort of like been sort of that, litmus test for how this kind of concept could play out, but I don't know if it really needs to make it to the big screen or it just needs to be just pared down quite a bit.
Yeah, and Wes Craven, he did write this. He did not write Scream. Kevin
like
Williamson wrote Scream.
It felt like the studio owed him one.
Yeah, and he had been somewhat involved in subsequent Nightmare on Elm Street movies. He wrote like a draft for the third one, which again I think is the best one. Yeah, he wrote a draft for Dream Warriors, and he gets credited with a story credit. But after that, he's not credited with writing subsequent ones up until this one. And they made a whole TV series, like an anthology show, Freddy's Nightmares. But he didn't write episodes of that. He just has a credit as character creator. So yeah, I guess this was really his return to the saga as a writer. But anyway, I agree. It was a pet project, and it was a cool idea. I don't know. Like, there's definitely a world where this could have worked, but maybe if only Kevin Williamson had been around then to give him some pointers on how to sort of keep the meta simple. Because this definitely, like, Scream definitely was streamlined in the way that it talked about slasher movies while itself being a slasher movie, whereas this sort of lost the thread. It was a kind of psychological serial killer movie combined with this like wacky fantasy, combined with this meta movie, and then it kept changing the rules.
I think if it had just stuck to one level of meta, just being like her living in the real world, dealing with the aftermath of being in these movies, and then sort of like it revealing that she was in it, versus now turning this into like this is a script that Wes is writing that like she's now stuck in that, but she's sort of aware of. Like, there's just like really just too much. Like they should have just kept with it sort of just living in the real world and leaving it at that.
Yeah. And I think your idea too for it being secretly, the craft services guy or something, it's kind of cool. I kind of like that.
If anything, it would never be a craft services guy. It would honestly be like a grip before anybody else. But that's just me.
The grips can definitely do the most damage.
Because they could just, I feel like, yeah, exactly.
And grips, for people that don't know, are the folks that handle lights on set. It's very heavy, a lot of electric equipment, a lot of wires, a lot of cables. They're in a union for a reason. Like, you gotta know what you're doing to be safe as a grip. So if they didn't, or if they were doing it for malicious purposes, it could easily go awry.
It's true.
We haven't even talked about Robert Englund. But that, the movie kind of makes him a bit of an afterthought, too. He's in it as Robert Englund, sort of like the snobbish movie star, and he got like this big mansion, and he's like painting terrifying pictures, and he's kind of creepy, and he's full of himself.
Yeah, that was honestly he had no reason to be in this movie.
No, I wanted more of that. You didn't want more of that? That was hilarious.
No, I just feel like it wasn't enough, or I don't know. I just wasn't sold on his role. I didn't really feel like he brought anything besides some sort of like sort of funny creep factor, but overall, I mean, what did he do besides talk on the phone, say that he couldn't meet up while he's painting creepy pictures?
Yeah, from a story perspective, they kind of dropped the ball. He disappears from the story, and we don't understand why or how aware he is of what's going on, because Wes is very aware, and Heather is very aware, but England is somewhat aware. He's seeing visions, he's painting visions, and then he flees or something with his wife, and we don't really understand what happens because we just never see him again. So It is strange that there isn't sort of more resolution with his little arc. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed him playing a more vain iteration of himself. I wanted more, but I agree that they didn't flesh it out enough. And then when he's playing this Freddy Krueger, it's again, he's playing a demon dressed up as Freddy Krueger, I guess, basically. But it's still more subdued than normal. Usually he has a bunch of pithy catchphrases, and sort of as the movies go on, he gets wackier and wackier. But like the first one, it's like very intense and scary, and the second one too. And he's got like a death metal voice. I mean, he always has a death metal voice, but there's something more cartoony about him in the later entries. And this one, he tries to tone it down, but again, the makeup is not his friend, and he's just such. He's scary enough when he plays Freddy Krueger, but you don't really see him that much. And yeah, it was just a little too little.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that he was sort of an afterthought of this podcast, because that's how the movie treated him. Well, I'm sad that you won't, or maybe you won't see any of the other ones. I swear they're all mostly better than this.
Well, I mean, since you seem so passionate in it, you're definitely gonna give him another try. But probably gonna space it out a little bit.
Yeah, start with 3. Well, thanks guys for listening to this special Halloween edition of Filmcore, and we'll see you again for the Home for the Holidays Thanksgiving edition of the Filmcore podcast.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Filmcore.